Hey guys, welcome to another unit overview for Total War Warhammer. This time we're taking a look at the early and long range Dwarfen Artillery units. This means that I'll only be covering the Grudge Throwers, Bolt Throwers and the Cannons in this episode. The Organ Guns, Flame Cannons and Regiments of Renown will have to wait for a separate one. Please keep in mind that the Bolt Throwers are only available if you own the King and the Warlord DLC. In this video I will take a look at the stats and performance of the units to decide which one is best in a certain situation. First, let's take a look at their cost and recruitment in the campaign though. These artillery units are all unlocked via the Guildmaster's building chain. The level 1 siege workshop unlocks both the Grudge and the Bolt Throwers, while the cannons are recruited from the level 2 gunsmith forge. There are no other requirements, which means that all of them can be recruited quite early in the campaign. The price of the units differ quite a lot though. The Bolt Throwers are the cheapest with a cost of 550 talents and an upkeep of 137. The Grudge Throwers cost 700 with an upkeep of 175, and the Cannons are the most expensive with a cost of 800 talents and 200 upkeep. Now let's talk about their performance in combat though, which is way more important of course. The Grudge Throwers, Bolt Throwers and Cannons all have the exact same melee, speed, armor and ammunition stats, so I won't go into those. You don't want to get your artillery crew in melee anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Interestingly enough though, the Bolt Thrower has a way higher leadership rating than the more expensive Grudge Thrower and Cannon units, however that shouldn't matter too much as well. So let's just take a look at the stats that do matter. First of all, range. As I mentioned before, these artillery units all have long ranges, but there are some major differences between them. Grudge Throwers offer the longest range with a range of 440, shortly followed by the Cannons with 420. If you deploy in the front, this will be enough to hit almost anything in the enemy deployment area instantly. The Bolt Thrower has a much shorter range with 340, but as you can see that's still enough to reach the front line of the enemy. So in most battles all of these units will have enough range to hit the enemy instantly. However, if you want to deploy your battle line further back or in a special position, the Bolt Throwers might not be able to hit the enemy instantly. All the units have enough range to hit enemy towers and walls on siege maps instantly as well though, and in my opinion 340 is enough in most occasions as well. Something that's even more important is damage though, so let's take a look at that now. First of all these artillery units offer armor piercing attacks. This means that their damage is split into base damage that can be blocked and armor piercing damage which will ignore armor and always deal the full amount of damage to the enemy. As you can see, the missile damage of these units increases progressively. The Bolt Throwers deals 137, the Grudge Thrower deals 148 and the Cannon deals 192. It's not as easy as it looks though, as there are more numbers on a deeper level. First, let's take a look at the Bolt Thrower. A Bolt Thrower deals 30 base damage and 116 armor piercing damage that's always applied to the enemy. This means that the maximum damage potential for these guys is 146. Cannons are quite similar but offer 100 base damage combined with 280 armor piercing damage, which brings their max damage potential to 380, which is of course way higher than the Bolt Throwers. Finally, the Grudge Thrower deals 30 damage and 140 armor piercing damage, but this one is quite special as it deals splash damage as well. They can deal 30 explosive base damage and 65 additional explosive armor piercing damage. This brings their maximum damage to 265, however keep in mind that the explosive damage will only be dealt to large groups of units. Now it does look like Bolt Throwers are terrible compared to the others in terms of damage, but let's take a look at reload speed, which is quite an important factor here as well. A Bolt Thrower has the quickest reload speed with 10.8 seconds, and this means that it is able to deal a maximum of 811 damage every minute. A Grudge Thrower is much slower with a reload time of 18 seconds, and this means they are able to deal 566 damage to single targets and 883 damage to large groups of enemies due to the additional explosive damage. Finally, Cannons have the slowest reload with 19.8 seconds, and this brings their maximum damage potential to 1151 per minute, which is of course very high compared to the others. So if you take a look at the numbers, we can actually see that things change because of the reload speed. The Bolt Throwers might deal a low amount of damage, but their fast reload means that they do damage more often, and this makes them actually much better against single targets than the Grudge Throwers for example. However, the explosive damage makes the Grudge Thrower better against large groups of units compared to the Bolt Thrower. Cannons do stand out from the others with 1150 damage, but now let's try to prove that in some test battles. Things change because of the way these siege engines operate. Bolt Throwers fight like ballistas and are very accurate. As you can see here, I'm aiming at a single entity at long range, but hitting almost all of my shots. That means that Bolt Throwers offer a great reload speed, but also extremely good accuracy. Cannons fight somewhat similar and are quite accurate as well, however it does seem like they are hitting less than your bolt throwers in my opinion. Most of the shots are very close but do miss the enemy, but if they do hit they do a massive amount of damage usually. Grudge Throwers obviously act like catapult and this gives them terrible accuracy compared to the other two. When doing the same test I was happy when I hit like once every 15 shots for example. An important factor that comes into play here is the pushback though. When the enemy gets hit, there's a chance that he will be pushed back or forced to fall on the ground. This slows down the target and gives the artillery the chance to land even more shots onto him. Because of the accuracy, bolt throwers for example tend to slow down the enemy a lot because they hit him a lot, giving them a chance to shoot even more before he reaches the battle line. Now we know everything in order to do some straight up battle tests. So first I've put all 3 units against a single general of the Empire. I'm just gonna shoot him and see how much damage he has suffered when he reaches my line. First of all, the bolt thrower. As said, its accuracy is great and forces the enemy to the ground quite often. The general has 2092 hit points remaining when he reaches my line. Grudge throwers have a much harder time against single entities because of the terrible accuracy. The general's a lot healthier now with 3119 hit points left. Finally, the cannons pack a real punch as well as they have great damage and accuracy. It does the most damage as the general only has 1774 HP left when he reaches my line. Now let's repeat the same thing with a giant, still a single entity but much easier to hit. Results are interesting here as the bolt and the grudge thrower cannot push back or slow down the giant at all. With the bolt thrower the giant still has 9555 health remaining and the results with the grudge thrower are even more disappointing with 9978 hit points left when he reaches the line. Interestingly, the cannons do manage to slow down the giant from time to time, which gives them much more time to shoot and deal more damage. The giant takes a lot of damage on this occasion and only has 4659 hit points left, an obvious victory for the cannons here. Then finally I'll show you a fight against some Chaos Warriors where the explosive damage of the Grudge Throwers come into play. The bolt thrower does the least amount of damage, the Chaos Warriors still have 4200 hit points left when it reaches the line. The cannons obviously perform better, in this case the enemy still has 3750 hit points left, but the winner in this fight is the Grudge Thrower, as his low accuracy doesn't matter in this case and the extra explosive damage helps out a lot. In this scenario the enemy only has 3250 HP left. Keep in mind that I repeated these tests with different units and maps, but in order to keep the video short and to the point I won't show you anymore. Based on these performances we can clearly get to some conclusions. To me, the cannons are definitely the best. They are decent against large groups of infantry, but they are extremely powerful against monsters, lords and other single entities. Overall they pack the most punch in my opinion. The Grudge Throwers are best against large groups of infantry in my opinion. They will deal the most damage out of all 3 against enemies that are bunched up. The bolt throwers are quite special as well. Some people think they are worthless, but I don't agree. Cannons will outclass them in every way, but grudge throwers do not. Bolt throwers are definitely better versus grudge throwers for sniping enemy lords and monsters, and because of their high rate of fire they're also able to land a lot of shots and slow down the enemy. I use these guys in the early campaign game to take down enemy lords, and they are especially good for that because of their low price. Before I end the video I would like to mention that there are some differences in siege battles as well. Cannons deal the most damage to walls and towers, followed by the grudge throwers and then the bolt throwers. I personally never use artillery against defenses because of the low damage they deal, but cannons are quite decent in taking down towers to be honest. That's all I'm gonna say about these units for now though. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and found it somewhat useful. Thanks for watching and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.